Okay, this is a quick video on how to do in-text citations. And I want to start by just showing you a scientific paper on mule deer and chronic wasting disease as an example of how to cite sources and also to just point out how often you have to cite sources. So this is by Lisa Wolf, who works in Fort Collins for Colorado Parks and Wildlife out at our wildlife research facility, and actually quite a few other local people as I look at this list. Highly credible people, and you can see their list of where they work right here. So first of all, a scientific paper has an abstract, and then the first section is the introduction. And the introduction is usually providing background information about the project and why it's important that they did this study. And it'll be very similar to a literature review that you may be asked to do in class. So I just want to read and point out to you how often information gets cited, and then we'll take a look at the formatting. So chronic wasting disease, known as CWD, and what this is saying is that this group, Williams, somebody with the last name of Williams and somebody with the last name of Young, in 1980 are the ones who named this disease. Okay, so that's referring to their publication where they're naming the disease. So even that is not considered common knowledge. So chronic wasting disease is an infectious, transmissible, spongiform encephalopathy of cervid species, including North American mule deer, Odocoileus homoeus. Now, notice, too, that every time an animal, a wildlife species, is mentioned in a paper, the first time, I should say, not every time, the first time a species is mentioned, you have to include its scientific name in parentheses and italics after you name the animal. So you can expect from here on they can just say mule deer, but this very first time they had to point out what species they were referring to. Areas of relatively high CWD prevalence in mule deer along Colorado's northern Front Range were among the earliest described. And they're saying, okay, Miller, who also works at the research facility, and others. That's what et al. Means. So that means that there were more than 3 authors, more than 2 or more than 3, depending on what style they use for citations. In a publication in 2000, said that it's a really high prevalence rate in the northern Front Range. Okay, so the need for effective strategies to lower CWD prevalence in this area and elsewhere has been recognized for some time. And then here's a whole list of articles that said, hey, we need effective strategies to lower CWD prevalence in a population. And because it came from multiple people have written about it, they list multiple sources here. Unfortunately, progress on understanding how to control CWD has been slow, and few empirical data have been reported. And then here's a couple more. So I read this whole paragraph to point out that there's not a single sentence in here that isn't cited. Even these people with a lot of credentials, a lot of research under their belt, are citing other research that's been done. In fact, Lisa Wolf, actually cites herself because she published about that in 2002. So even though it is her original work, it's not her original work for this article. So she has to cite it every single time, that it's not common knowledge and it's not original to the research being written about right now. So I point that out because it's a big mistake I see from students, is that they'll just assume everything's common knowledge and not cite it. And even if it's stuff you learn in your classes, that's probably not common knowledge. You're going to need to go find some articles that demonstrate whatever point you're trying to make, and then you need to cite them. It's not an easy process, unfortunately. Okay, so if you read through this paper, you'll see that it continues along that path. They cite multiple sources on just about every sentence. And the other thing I want to point out is if there's just one author, let me see if I can find one. It's rare to have this one, Pybus, 2012. That means that Pybus was the only author on that paper. So it's just his or her last name and the year. And then other times there might be 2 authors, like Gross and Miller, 2001. And so if there's 2 authors, you use both authors' last name with the word and in the middle, 2001 after it. And you'll notice too, one more thing. Once there's more than 2 authors, it's et al., as I previously pointed out. You'll notice too there can be a variety of ways of citing that. Usually it's in parentheses after the sentence before the period when you're citing your sources. But you could also say, like according to Miller, 2012, chronic wasting disease is a big deal, or something like that. You could list it out that way too, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now I want to come down here to the end of the paper where the reference section is. And here's the literature cited, and you'll find some of those sources that we looked at earlier listed in here in alphabetical order. Here's some of Wolf's previous ones that she referred to. So Wolf et al. 2002. If there's multiple articles from the same year, you'll have to have an A, like 2004A, and 2004B after the year. So now you can cross-reference. If you find something in the article that was interesting and you want to find that article, you can just come down to the literature cited, go to the author's last name and the year, and find the name of the article that they were referring to. Okay, so in your D2L Dropbox, I've provided a link to doing in-text citations, which is actually part of the Purdue Online Writing Lab, and the Poudre River Public Library uses this as a reference as well, and you can get to it from our Front Range website. But I prefer the Chicago author date style. And so Chicago author date style or APA style are similar, very, very similar. They do not use footnotes and endnotes. I don't like that style. Most of our scientific papers do not use that. So if you're using some citation managers, you want to choose one of those two styles, Chicago author date or APA. So if I come down here to general format of the Chicago, I can read through here and kind of find how I should do it. Here's examples of my title page. Here's examples of how to refer to things in a text, how to do quotations, which you'll rarely do in scientific literature, how to put your reference section in order, and an example of what that bibliography might look like. Okay, and again, we're not doing the footnotes section. And the other thing I want to point out on this page is I can come over here and get an example sample paper. So here is a sample paper. It is not on wildlife, it's on moving networks into the composition classroom. Doesn't that sound exciting? But this paper then shows you exactly how everything should be spaced, how citations should be done in the text. For example, Michael Hart and Antonia Negri, and then in parentheses the year of their paper, on the other hand, argue that the internet is exemplar of the rhizome, a non-hierarchical, non-centered network. Blah. Okay, but you get the idea that that's another way of doing it rather than just putting Hart and Negri 2009 at the end of a sentence that you've summarized from their work. And so this paper then can go through and show you how to do it. I will say that it will ask you to put page numbers in it sometimes. You always put pages for quotations, but for paraphrasing, it's optional, and I do not require page numbers. I just require the author and date because most scientific literature will not include page numbers unless it's a quotation. Okay, so this is an excellent website, Purdue Owl Online Writing Lab. You can pretty much find every answer to questions you have about formatting in this website, and it's highly referred to by other sources, so I know it's widely used as kind of the reference for how to do these things. So pay attention to that. Style matters, in-text citations matter, and your reference section matters, so make sure you spend some time making sure that that's all correct.